Welcome back everyone, Mudford here. Exciting day out in the shop today. We just got a bunch of boxes from ZZPerformance. So the biggest thing we got is we got their intercooler for 3800. They're one of the leading people on 3800 parts. So this is going to mount under the Supercharger. It's going to have hoses that run up to this heat exchanger that's going to be up, down, low in front of our radiator. And we did that so that we can run a smaller pulley for more boost and more performance. So we have their modular system here. So we're going with a smaller pulley. And in order to run the intercooler, you need different fuel rails or some kind of a fuel solution because the stock rails won't work because the intercooler will raise things up too much. So we got their fuel rails. We also got their 1.0 computer. So this is tuned. It's just like a canned tune that they have for it with your specs, so they can keep the cost down. But later on, maybe we'll get HP tuners and be able to do some tuning work ourselves or a remote tune from them. So now we've got some work to do. What we're going to be doing in this video is replacing the computer with an upgraded one. We're going to be putting an intercooler underneath the Supercharger, changing out the fuel rails because of the intercooler height is going to mess them up, and we're putting a smaller pulley on. We're putting the Modular Pulley System for quick pulley changes. First thing we're going to do right now is we're going to change the computer out. So if you've seen my other video where we installed the ZZP cold air kit, you'll know what I'm going to do now. We're just going to pull the support out, and I've already got the bolts loose in there, 13 millimeters. So we're just going to take this right out of the way. What I'm doing right now is just disconnecting things that go over the Supercharger or are connected to it. Like the back spark plug wires, I took them off the coils and fished them through and threw them up out of the way. That's a lot easier than taking them off the spark plugs back there. You need to let the pressure off the fuel system. I just used a screwdriver and pushed the Schrader valve in. Now we can start taking the fuel system off. And you're just going to have to disconnect a few sensors and stuff here right now. So I've got the special tools in there on the fuel lines. I checked to make sure there's no pressure on the fuel line. Now we're going to disconnect the fuel line and get the fuel rails right out. Well, I got them released. You can see what holds them on, those keepers in there. And they just slide on this line, and then those hit on this and don't let it pull off. What this does is it just pushes them back so that you can slide the line off, and it doesn't always work real good. Sometimes you kind of got to fight them a little bit, but eventually they'll come off. These ones weren't that bad. Looks like we just have 4 10mm nuts holding the fuel rail on, and then there's a 13mm holding where the lines hook on top of the Supercharger. So I'm going to go ahead and buzz those out and get this fuel rail right off. I got the stock fuel rail out. It was just a little tricky getting the back injectors unplugged, but no big deal. Now it's out of the way. So I'm probably going to take the throttle body off and get it out of the way because that wire harness goes right over, and I'm not sure how far straight up I'm going to have to go. I might be able to slide it out, but it's only 3 bolts to get the throttle body off, so I'm going to go ahead and do that and move it out of the way. So I got the throttle body off and out of the way. I'm just going to go ahead and start taking the bolts out. There's a few brackets on the back side there that are going to have to come off. Another bolt there. But I'm going to go ahead and start getting all this off. there we go. Supercharger is off. I'm going to do some cleaning up here. It looks like we had a squirrel or something, or chipmunk up in here at some point. So we're getting ready to pull the old pulley off. I rented the tool from ZZP. I didn't buy it because once we pull this off, we're going to put the modular system on, so we won't have need to pull the pulley off the shaft because the hub stays on. So we'll be able to switch pulleys a lot easier. So I've got the tool on, and it just wraps around the pulley, bottom side of the pulley most of the way. And then now we're going to go ahead and tighten this up, and it should pull the pulley right off the shaft. The old pulley is off now. This is just a specialty puller. It's made to fit right around your pulley. Works pretty good. This is a whole lot easier working on it out of the car, I think, maybe. So pushing the pulley on, or in our case pushing the new hub on, what you need to do is hold the bolt stationary and the triangle piece here stationary and turn this nut, and it's going to press it right on. There we go, I got the hub on flush now, and now I can go ahead and get the pulley back on and get this thing cleaned up. So I've got the gasket surface cleaned up on the Supercharger. You can see the blades in there. They appear to be in good shape. The Supercharger looks to be in good shape. We're going to go ahead and start putting it back together. Got the gasket surfaces cleaned up on the intake. I'm going to go ahead and install the new fuel rails now. I got them ready to go. Transferred the injectors over to the new fuel rails, and we're ready to put them in. Get some of the wiring out of the way here. Got the front fuel rail on. There's a lot of cool things about these fuel rails from ZZP. They're powder coated, they look real nice. It's really cool that they're separate like this. So I can put them both on and then go ahead and put the intercooler on. So it just makes it easier to see down in there to make sure the injectors are in, and easier to get the wiring hooked up. So I'm going to go ahead and get the back one in now. This fuel rail doesn't come with the regulator. It has the housing for it here, but no regulator, so you just got to reuse your old one. And then that just kind of threads on to the back fuel rail. So we're going to go ahead and get this fit down in place now and get it. So we're going to go ahead and get it fit in place down there and then bolt it down, and then we can hook the fuel lines up. But we can't hook the one going across to the other fuel rail yet. We'll have to wait until the intercooler and the Supercharger are both on before we can do that. I'm going to go ahead now and just set the intercooler on. What I did is I put sealant around top and bottom of the gasket around every hole like it says in the instructions, and I'm going to go ahead and set the intercooler on now. So I RTV'd around the openings in the top gasket now on top of the intercooler, so we're ready to set the Supercharger back on. Well, I guess I wasn't recording earlier, but the Supercharger back on. Okay, I got every bolt through now. I just got to go ahead and tighten them down. So the kit comes with the torque spec and the order to torque them down in. I'm going to go ahead and hand tighten them all first real quick. I needed a 6mm hex head. I had one, but I just didn't have it in a socket one. So I kind of just made one so I can get a torque reading. It's all torqued down now. We're just going to spin it and make sure the supercharger is not binding on anything. One added benefit to this is it did lift the throttle body up a full 2 inches away from the crossover exhaust pipe. That should help a little bit with heat, getting it away from it a little bit. Okay, so what I'm doing now, this is the bracket for the map sensor, and where it mounts is up 2 inches higher, so we're just going to bend the bracket mounts up a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and take it off so I don't damage it while I'm bending. I got them bent up so they're roughly going to be straight across now where the mount goes for the map sensor and the mount where the bracket mounts. So we'll see how that's going to work. Got just about everything done on the top side now. I've got the vacuum lines to finish running. I've got one vacuum line that needs to run over here, and then it comes across. I've got to replace that. I'm going to have to get some junkyard parts, and then I have to run. From that, I'm going to run up to my new fuel pressure regulator that's on the back now instead of where it was up here. So I have to do that. I need to run the hoses, but I've already got the intercooler mounted. That was the front heat exchanger for the intercooler is already mounted. That was pretty easy. One of the easier things of the whole job. I just had to take the bumper cover off. And I took the little side inserts out here to direct air through the radiator so that I could fit the intercooler in. Because it sticks up beside it, I'm going to have to trim them before I put them back in. It had 2 tabs on the front that go into the bumper. So I just ran the bolts down through. I think this was actually made for a different car because I think it was supposed to go through a hole. Support here, mine didn't have a hole, but it did line up real close, so I just used the supplied bolt and added a washer and sandwiched it. All that's doing really is just keeping it from moving like up and down. The front bolts to the bumper are holding it pretty solid, but they just let it wiggle a little bit. Now it's pretty rigid in there with that. ZZP supplied the fittings. They're just plastic. These are for the main lines, and then this is going to be for the fill tube. So I'm going to put some sealant, like RTV sealant, on these threads, and the fill one just goes down there, and then we're going to have a clear hose that comes up here where we can fill it with antifreeze. And then the other two, you can kind of see where they stick out on the sides, the inlet and the outlet. So that's what I'm going to do now, is just get these coated. So this is the lower support for the bumper cover. And I've had to do some trimming around here. I'll show you why. So this is going to set right here, so the intercooler is right in the way. So that's why I had to trim this back a little bit. There's just some holes in the bumper. And that's what holds these in place, is just a couple of plastic pins. I'll push them in. So that one's good. You might think that shouldn't put this in because it'll be blocking the intercooler a little bit, but the bumper cover is going to go right over this anyway, so all this does is support the bumper cover. So we have to trim a little bit of this piece. We're going to trim a little bit off the front of this piece to put our intercooler pump right here. So this is just kind of a gusset to reinforce this bend here. So we're just going to notch a little piece out, and then we're going to mount our pump right there. We want our pump to be right here, but it's going to stick under a little bit, and that should be perfect. I got the hose coming down right there. I'm going to route it right here into the top. See the intercooler right there where the hoses hook up, so this should work pretty good. Just going to trim it and then get it mounted up, and then I got to run the wiring. Pump is mounted. Cut the notch out and mounted the pump. It's just one screw that holds it. It's right into the frame. Should be pretty solid. Now we just need to get the hose run over here, cut and put on. And we're just going to finish running the hoses. That's pretty simple. The only hard part is going to be kind of squeezing them through to route them where we want. I was having some clearance issues with the hose where it goes under the fog light, and it's right by where it connects to the intercooler, so I did some trimming, cut some of the bottom of the fog light. So that stuff was, all that stuff was hitting the hose right here, so I just got it out of the way, and now we have a much better fit, and we shouldn't have any problems with anything puncturing the hose now. Everything connected how I want it now. I got the fog light back in. I've got everything zip tied to hold the hoses right where I want them. You can see it's kind of a tight fit under here. Got everything zip tied together good. The only thing we need to do now is figure out how to wire up the pump. I got the ground hooked up where I put the strap to mount the pump, and I've got the positive wire going up and through, and I did hook it just up on the positive terminal up there, and so it was just on all the time. And I did that in order to fill up the system with antifreeze. So I just poured it in here, tried to keep a level in there with the pump on. I got most of the air worked out, but I did run out of antifreeze, so I'm going to have to make a run to the store tomorrow and get some more. I would think normally for a pump you would run a relay, but the wires going to this one are just tiny wires, so it's not going to draw a bunch of amperage. So I'm just going to hook in to this ignition wire so it'll be on whenever the key is on. So I'm just going to use this connector here, snap it in there, snap it shut, and it should work pretty good. Key, you can probably hear the pump is going now with the key on, so that's good news. So it's just spliced in right there. So as I'm putting the plastic on under the bumper cover, I'm finding I'm having to trim a lot of it a little bit for the intercooler. Not a big deal, just a little bit of extra work, but I just wanted to show you that. Well, I had the car in the shop. I went ahead and changed the oil because it was pretty close to due for an oil change, and I also added a little bit of Freon because it's springtime, it's getting warmer. I bought the car in the late fall, so I never really noticed if the air conditioner worked good or not. And it was a little low, so I just added a little bit of Freon. I'm going to go ahead and check the oil and top it off, and should be ready for a test drive. So this thing should make a whole lot more power. I can't wait to find out how much. Probably need better tires. Well, I'm out here on the test drive, and I did notice, wow, it seems to build boost a lot quicker now with this setup. Seems a lot peppier. So I went with a 3.25 pulley, and I was afraid it might be too small of a pulley for the mods I have, but I haven't seen any knock retard yet, even when I've been hammering it, so I think I made the right choice. Can't wait to race this thing. See 285 horsepower, but when I got up to there, I was starting to see some knock retard. That was when I was doing a really hard launch, and I was at real high RPM. So I think the only thing I'm going to have to do is I'll run race fuel if I'm actually racing it. But just daily driving it, this pulley will work fine. The only time I had knock retard was when I was at like 6,000 RPM. here. Sitting here at the track with Jeremiah in the Buick. We've run one time trial pass, and you can see we got a 8.73 with ones at 83 miles an hour. So I picked 8.68 for my dial-in time in my first round. We got 8.68 with a 3.0. So we're doing pretty good. I'm just afraid I'm going to break out on my next pass. We're in round 2 of the street trophy class here at Northern Michigan Dragway. We'll see how far this Buick can make it.